I would like to welcome you all, what I'm tempted to call a historic occasion, for this is the first in a series of events leading up to the launch of the Global Democracy Initiative on the 29th of May of this year. My name is Lucy Kirschlin, and I will be moderating this session. And on the panel, we have representatives and actually in most cases, founders or co-founders of some trailblazing organizations behind this long overdue and really urgent initiative as well. The organizations that have founded the Global Democracy Initiative all have in common one objective. That is to democratize global politics and, equally importantly, find and implement effective solutions to global problems. And as we will be hearing in the course of this webinar, each organization has its own distinct values, passions, and aims driving it. But it is clear to each and every one that we will only achieve our mission of global democracy if we embrace collaboration, harvest synergies, and build on each other's strengths to create a stronger, a more purposeful, and energized initiative on a global level. And I think it's probably clear to everyone who's joined this webinar that the time is really more than ripe to be working together on a global democracy initiative. And in fact, all organizations with similar aims, with similar intentions of contributing and building a global democratic system are more than welcome to join the Global Democratic Initiative. The only condition is that you are genuinely prepared to commit and engage in achieving global democracy within the next few years. So we're not talking about the pie in the sky, we're actually talking about really concrete nuts and bolts of how to build a system which really will push for effective global solutions. And that within a very specific time frame. Anyway, today's session will be very exciting, I think. We will be starting off talking about, not just about global democracy, but talking about the different ideas that the organizations on the panel have to achieve global democracy. And I'm delighted to welcome Asaf Eshet of Global Online Democracy, Santiago Siri of Democracy Earth, Fernando Iglesias of Democracia Global, Barnaby Flynn of Global People's Power, and Gary Colombo of the GLOCO, the Global Community. And before we kick off, allow me to just share some household issues. So for all taking part, please be aware that we are recording this session. So just for your information. The speakers will be in the order that I just presented the organizations, if possible. I will be quite strict on timing. So each speaker has about 10 minutes to present their organization. And at the end, we will have about 30 minutes then for questions and answers. And I would like to ask you, as questions come up, to put those in the chat. You will have the opportunity, hopefully, if we have enough time at the end, to ask them yourselves. But if you put them in the chat, that will give our colleague Emilia Ismail the opportunity to just make sure that we can maybe bunch them together if necessary. So with not much further ado, I would really like to hand over the floor to our first speaker, and I'm really excited to ask Asaf Eshet of Global Online Democracy, the founder and head behind it, to kick off this historic event. Thank you very much.
Hello, Lucy. thanks for the introduction. I couldn't do it better myself. I will just share the screen quickly. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome. My name is Asaf Eshed, and I'm the founder of the Global Online Democracy Organization, which was founded in 2018. The Global Online Democracy is an organization as well as a community of people that believes that a smooth transition from the current political system to a better one will happen only with the help from technology. Our efforts are directed to change representative democracy into direct democracy online. Our focus is on building a system where we vote together, not for a politician, but we vote for how we want to solve different problems globally, nationally, and locally. You can think about it as a referendum 24/7 in every subject that we need to solve. Global warming, nuclear warfare, plastic in the oceans, actions to support biodiversity, stopping wars, increasing...
Asaf,
Yes?
Asaf, sorry to interrupt, but we see your desktop and not your slides.
Ah, do you? Okay, so you see my text.
Now we see you.
Now you see me. Okay.
Which is good.
Just a second.
Which is better than your desktop.
What do you see now?
We still see you.
Second.
Now, brilliant.
Now. Okay, sorry for that. We tested it twice, but in the end it went like this. Okay, so now I hear someone speaking, but I will just continue. So, okay, so we can think about it as a referendum 24/7 in every subject we want to solve. The platform that we are building facilitates the decision-making process and help us make better decisions. The decisions we make together are based on knowledge and expertise. So for the first time in history, our system will harness the knowledge of the academia and research centers, integrate it in the information about the problem we need to solve, and help us make better decisions. Our system will facilitate a global constitution that will be formulated by the global community and will address social and human rights as well as governmental restrictions globally. More on our governance model, please find in our website globalonlinedemocracy.org. So how does global online democracy see or understand global democracy? One of the most important factors of democracy is to structure the general rules and regulations that governments can apply against its citizens. In the same way, a global democracy will need to have global constitution to create equality between all the people in the world and restrict governments from using their power against their citizens. Now, after World War II, there was a need to facilitate mass number of opinions for a decision-making system. Democracy couldn't be achieved since internet was not invented yet, and there was no way to facilitate these votes but to choose a person to represent big groups of people. So instead of democracy, we are stuck now with representative democracy, which is a completely different system. Unfortunately, representative democracy is not good enough for many reasons we already know, but mainly it has the potential that if a strong enough politician believes that his needs are more important than the needs of the citizens, he can crush the essence of democracy and get the country to spiral towards authoritarian regime. We see many examples of this in the last 20 years. The same applies to big international corporations that are messing with our democracy with their lobbying efforts. The global online democracy see the creation of global democracy as first priority, mostly since the problems are piling up and countries are more occupied competing with one another than to debate and agree on how to solve these problems. But at the same time, global online democracy objects strongly to a creation of a global democracy on the structure of representative democracy. In other words, we object having global politicians that are voted in the same way national politicians are being elected. So what are we looking for? We are looking for a global democracy in which the structure of the decision-making system and processes are developed, designed, and agreed upon by the global community. In other words, all of us together, creating a strong enough system that can facilitate mass number of opinions and decisions is relatively easy task these days, but no one of us can do it alone. Nothing will happen if we will not unite our economic forces, intellectual forces, technological forces, and forces that each of us have, which are just telling people about this initiative and helping them see that there is hope. So to answer the question, how do we see global democracy? We think that global democracy should come in the shape of an online decision-making system that unites all of us around a problem that we all need to solve. May it be global warming, nuclear weapons, pandemics, inequality, hunger, or all of these problems at the same time. With no left and right, no Republicans or Democrats, there is only us and an urgent problem to be solved. We can do it if we unite and support one another. The GDI is a good start. We have united here to give an example that global democracy is not about ego. It's about being united together for a better future. So thank you for listening, and sorry for the technical problems in the beginning. I will be happy to answer all the questions in the Q&A session.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Asaf. And what a ending to hand over to unite for a better future and to collaborate. That's exactly the spirit that we want to engage together with. Thank you so much. Now, I don't know whether Santi has joined. Sorry, I can't quite see. But if so, then Santiago Siri of Democracy Earth would be coming up as a next speaker.
He's joining right now. 1 second.
Oh, that's fantastic timing. Let's see whether he's already online. Otherwise, I could also hand over to someone else first.
Maybe if Barnaby's ready, we start with him so Santiago can join in.
I think that might be a good idea. Why not? Barnaby, are you ready to speak? Would you be up for the challenge? 10 minutes? Great. Oh, you're on mute though. That might make it a little difficult. So Barnaby Flynn, the man behind Global People's Power. Thank you very much, Barnaby.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for Global Community for organising this event and to enable organisations that have ultimately the same vision, but perhaps very slightly different ways of achieving it, and to enabling us to model what it is that we're asking the rest of the world to do, which is to cooperate to solve global problems. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a nature lover at heart. The outside world is what makes me feel normal and sane and just right. And so the falling in love with nature was the thing that radicalized me and helped me see systems, how they function, and to realize that how the system that we live in now is destroying the natural world. So and the word radical is Greek from roots. So being able to see the root cause of problems which are impacting our daily lives. And I like to pretend that I already live in the world wherein global cooperation and participative democracy already exists. And so I see people in the streets and around and about, and imagine that the people seem so confident and connected and empowered, and feel connected with the whole of the world, and feel that a dual responsibility, that they have we have a responsibility for people who we call our own, our community, and for the rest of the world as well. If you can envision something, I think it helps to make it happen. So global people power, demos, people, kratos, power. So it's global democracy is the name behind the organization, which I founded myself a few years ago. It's changed as new technologies and new campaigns have come to my attention. I've had to completely change, and myself and the people within Global People Power have changed our strategy, and we've just changed again from thinking that online democracy is the way forward, where now we consider that citizens' assemblies are the way to go. So the problems we have are immediate, but the ice caps are melting, the rainforest's on fire. We have we're in the 6th mass extinction event, and pandemic is caused by destruction of nature. And as these problems get compounded, people become more reactionary, and it seems like the world is moving towards a more authoritarian regimes, especially in the UK now, where they're trying to make it illegal to protest. So it's a scary time. So I agree that we have to make this happen as quickly as possible. So we need cooperation. The solutions to global problems already exist. The key to tackling them is cooperation between nations. And why aren't nations already cooperating? So competition between nations it could be considered as an emergent property. It is an emergent property, but also it is weaponized. So the way this happens is that you've got a more kind of insidious weaponization of competition between nations, is where multinational corporations hold national governments to ransom. They threaten them with moving their jobs and their capital to other countries with more business-friendly policies, which are less regulatory to protect workers' rights, less regulatory to protect nature, and also they demand subsidies to keep them afloat, and also often set up fake grassroots organizations, also demanding less tax, less corporation tax. So the way I see it is, and the way we see it in Global People Power, is that with politicians have, our so-called world leaders have given power away to transnational bodies. So, and filling that place is a more overt system of international divide and rule, which is far-right oligarchs and autocrats are filling that space, and they're using division. They're saying other cultures, nationalities, and ethnicities are the cause of global problems, not the system that that we live in. So to tackle this problem, so actually the root cause of both insidious and overt divide and rule is a culture that stems back to thousands of years ago, to our Proto-Indo-European cultural heritage, and our language comes from that. So you've got right, rein, royal, which is a male thinking, and left, sinister in Latin, which is sinister. So we have inherited a patriarchal, feudalistic, and Aryan white supremacist mindset that we need to overcome with a more feminine, inclusive, cooperative balance. So we need to cooperate globally. So together we can break down the walls that divide us. We can create a structure which is, because the system is structured in a way that it is weaponized, the competition between nations. So therefore, a top-down only approach, I think, will be co-opted too easily. So we need a bottom-up and a top-down approach. So how can we democratize global power? How can we drive global cooperation? So my first thoughts on this is we need a sense of belonging to an organization, to a movement. And I think Earth citizenship is key to that. So I've been really excited by following Democracy Earth's process of enabling people to register as a bona fide citizen as using blockchain technology. So you can, using attention mining, we can say that, yes, that person, I recognize that person, I know that person, and you can register yourself as an Earth citizen online. And I think the whole notion of Earth citizenship will help humanity to recognize their dual responsibility to their nation, but also to the rest of the world. And I think especially the next generation will really, that'll chime with the next generation, and that will take us forward. So I'm really excited about Earth citizenship. So to create the global policies to tackle global problems, I used to think that online democracy, until very recently, was the key, but I've now changed my mind, and the people of Global People Power have also concluded that citizens' assemblies, as called for by Extinction Rebellion, are the way forward. There are already global citizens' assemblies organizations. There is a Global Assembly and a World Assembly. Global Assembly is looking specifically at climate change, and World Assembly are looking at genome editing, and also asking citizens to say which issues they think are most important and they need tackling first. So if those citizens' assemblies should be asked specific questions, so what kind of world do you want to live in? What are the most urgent global problems? What are the systemic root causes of global problems? What are the key barriers to implementing those problems? And what is a multi-issue policy package that could be implemented by the world using just a few policies which would make the biggest amount of difference? And that idea lends from Simpol as well, who talk about multi-issue policy packages. I used to be involved with Simpol and their inception. So, and also in what time frame should those policies be implemented? Now, also, there's other ways that we can, sorry, I'm missing a piece of paper here. So,
Barnaby, I don't want to interrupt, but you've just got another couple of minutes, all right?
Okay, yeah, so so to be able to compel and to drive governments to work together, there's an action plan as well. So we need to take to the streets to demonstrate our Earth citizenship, and also using Simpol's strategy of voting. So for we're asking politicians at election time to sign up as Earth citizens, which means that they sign a contract to agree to cooperate globally to implement Citizens' Assembly's first global policy package alongside other governments. And so they would sign up to that provisionally until such time as the policies had developed and we had sufficient countries around the world who were on board to implement the policies. Also, we could go out and ask people, what do you think the world could and should agree to act on together? And finally, the last aspect of global people power is one heart aspect, is to recognize that our cultural heritage, to going back to our evolutionary psychology, the very earliest years. So we gained our evolutionary niche through high levels of cooperation and a strong level of fairness. For most people, these remain our dominant values. Also, looking at system science, we recognize that everyone and everything is interconnected. And the reason why this movement is so important is because it's helping people to celebrate our individuality, our culture, and our common humanity as we work together to tackle a perfect storm of planetary problems, which is facing, which we all can face together and to resolve together.
Thank you very much, Barnaby. That's actually very rallying, I think, your approach. What is really interesting is that I think, you know, we're all kind of latching onto, of course, digital technologies to enable a global democratic system, but I think it's without a doubt that we will need kind of real life engagement, commitment and identification as well. So it's not an either or, but how to bring that together to identify issues and create solutions and implementations. And just by the by, you mentioned Simple several times for our listeners, for our viewers, for our participants. Simple is also a founding member of the Global Democracy Initiative. So that's very exciting. But I will, in that case, hand over now to Santiago Siri, who is the head behind
Hi, I'm still 2 minutes away from my office, so if I can.
Problem, Santi. But then in that case, maybe I could ask Fernando Iglesias of Democracia Global to jump in before. Would that be all right? And that will give Santi a little bit more time to kind of settle down in his office.
Okay, no problem at all.
Thank you very much. Okay, Fernando, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, the Global Democracy Initiative. This is very encouraging. I know a couple of members, we had some relation with Simple a long time ago, and of course, Santiago Siri he's an Argentine, but I ignored that Santiago was working on this line, and I supposed to know because I am a member of the parliament and etc. But I am basically a writer on global issues, and the fact that so many people are working on this field and I ignore, I am supposed to know. It's very encouraging. It means that the fact that the need for a global democracy, a big change in our political system, a big change on the way we manage global issues are evident, and more people are working on this line. This is very good news. Well, first, I'm going to try to make just short sentences, telegrams for my generation, tweets for new ones, because the time is very reduced. First thing, why global democracy? Well, I used to put three statements on the table. First one, we are living in a world in which we are globalizing technological and economic processes. This means that we are facing global problems and in many cases, global crises. I identify 5 crises: economic, ecologic, demographic, the control of technology, and the monopoly of violence by national states are at stake. So we need global solutions for this crisis. This is the second statement. We have global problems, sometimes global crises. We need global solutions. And the third statement is we need global solutions have to be democratic, not taken by an elite, enlightened elite, but by the participation of all the citizens who are affected by these policies. Well, it's very encouraging that we are discussing this, also because the creation of national democracies was preceded by a long polemic on the nature of democracy. You know, Tocqueville, Montesquieu, Rousseau, the polemic about the division of powers, etc., etc. And now we are discussing these kind of problems at the global level. We need direct democracy or representative democracy. This is a question. We trust on top-down processes or bottom-up processes. This is another question. And this shows also that we need the need of a global democracy is creating a moment to work on that. So what is this global democracy? I will define as the attempt of balance the system. Some decades ago, we had national democracies and basically national economies. Now we have a global war in economy, global financial institutions, global economy, global technologies, etc., etc., etc. But we still have national and sometimes international institutions which are not enough. You know, United Nations is okay, European Union is okay, International Criminal Court is okay, but they are not enough. We need to reinvigorate, we need to democratize them, and we need to intervene at this global level with the basic principles of democracy. So democracy was from the beginning combined in big extensions with federalism. This was the origin of the creation of the United States and then of my country, Argentina, and then Brazil, etc. Democracy associated with federalism. And these are two elements who, in my opinion, they cannot be separated. Global democracy and world federalism. I'm also the president of the World Federalism Movement, and I think that our contribution to the democratization of the European Union and the creation of the European Parliament and the creation of the International Criminal Court were very important contributions we should to continue. So democracy, global democracy is not about a world state, it's not about a world government, it's about the democratization of existing institutions like the United Nations, the European Union, and the creation of new ones like International Criminal Court and other ones. It means also three basic rules, which are rule of law, respect of republican institutions, and federalism. So what is Democracia Global and what we are doing in this respect? Basically, we have many initiatives. We define Democracia Global, which is a small Argentine organization based in Buenos Aires. We have more than 10 years of work now. And we define Democracia Global as a movement for South American Union and World Parliament, global democracy and World Parliament. So we support different initiatives. At the global level, I will mention two of them. First, the Manifesto for a Global Democracy. This was written by me and other members of Democracia Global, but it was signed by many, many important intellectuals all over the world with a, I think, very strict and meaningful explanation about what Democracia Global, what global democracy is about. When I mean important intellectuals, I mean from left and liberals and etc. I mean Noam Chomsky, Saskia Sassen, Ulrich Beck, Sigmund Bauman, David Hell, Daniele Archibugi, Giacomo Marramao, Lucio Levi, etc., etc., etc. Many, many important thinkers. We identified a common field from left to right to democratic people has to be in favor of global democracy. This manifesto is online, manifesto on global democracy, and you can participate and impulse that. We are trying to reinvigorate that. We had also a statement in this line about the crisis, the pandemic crisis on COVID-19. And this is also an important statement. If you are interested, you can check. Second one, we are supporting a big campaign, 10 years campaign for the creation of United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, UNPA. We had some kind of federal body, United Nations, which is the General Assembly, the representation of states, but we need a representation of citizens inside the United Nations. So there is a campaign which is directed by a very active group. You can check it. This initiative. It has many signatories. Boutros Ghali was one of the founding fathers, and we are supporting strongly this idea of creating some kind of embryo of democratic representation at the level of the United Nations, UNPA. And finally, we have a regional dimension. We are here in Latin America, and the most important threat to democracy, to life, to economic development is organized crime. There is a convention of the United Nations, the Palermo Convention against transnational organized crime. And here we face the same kind of problems. Mafias and organizations related to drug trafficking, human trafficking, and economic bribes to politicians, etc. They are transnational, they are regional, they are connected to the world, and the organizations who have to fight with them are national, are only national. They are disconnected. National justice, national parliaments, national this and national that, with no coordination, with no interchange of information, etc. So we are proposing the creation of a Latin American criminal court against organized transnational crime. And this is another initiative because we don't think on global democracy like a centralized system on the top with some kind of strong institution directing all the world, etc. We look at the idea of global democracy in terms of federalism, of network. No, we speak more than on federalism, we speak about a network of democratic decision-making for all the relevant levels of politics, the national one, but also under the national one, the states inside a nation, the cities, but also the regions like European Union, like Mercosur, like Latin America, etc., and also at the global level, which means United Nations and International Criminal Court, and all the embryos, because all these are the embryos of the basic powers of democracy, which are executive power, legislative power, and judicial power. I think we should look at the situation in some way, in a very worried way. The problems are urgent and the possibility of chaos is arising. The fact that we have many undemocratic powers rising all over the world, and we had a crisis on the concept of democracy inside the same United States and the European Union. This is very worrying. At the same time, I look these three powers and I see there are embryos, not democratic, but at least embryos of a democratic global structure, because we had the G20, we had United Nations and the General Assembly, and we had the International Criminal Court. I know the criticism is very justified. They are still elitist, but usually also if we look at the history of the creation of national democracies, at the beginning, the powers were not democratic. They were an elite governing on each other. It's our work, in my opinion, to work together in order to democratize all these institutions and to ask for the rights of the citizens. And I don't see a contradiction between direct democracy and representative democracy. I think that these two elements could be combined. And I don't think also a contradiction of the top-down processes of the bottom-up processes. They have to be combined in order to create a global democracy. And this is what the history of the creation of democracy at the national and the regional level shows to us. I am very happy to be here and available for comments, initiatives, and participation. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Fernando, thank you so much. Apologies. I think it's without a doubt that your organization, and of course you as a person, have the longest track record on actually engaging in democracy on a regional and on a global level. And I think these are really important experiences and expertise that you bring with us and bring to the Global Democracy Initiative. So thank you again for joining. And there'll be opportunities for questions later. So now, not quite last, but I hope Santiago is now ready, because then I would like to welcome Santiago Siri to the session. And here is another organization who has a really impressive track record in the digital sphere. So please, Santi, thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Please accept my apologies. I was a bit on the run today. But I'd like to introduce you to the work of Democracy Earth Foundation. And especially during the last month, we reached a couple of very important milestones when it comes about figuring out how to deploy democracies anywhere there's an internet connection. And just to give a brief introduction to what I'm gonna demo for you today, since 2012, we, first with Partido de la Red, which was a political party in Buenos Aires, and since 2015 with Democracy Earth Foundation, I have been involved with several pilots to deploy democracies online, digital democracies. We work with NGOs, political parties, government, national level, local level, and we tried every model of democracy you can think of, liquid democracy, direct democracy, participatory budgeting, quadratic voting, etc. And we use every piece of technology that we thought might look interesting. Open source software development, of course, but we tried doing stuff with Bitcoin in the old days and with Ethereum more recently. And one common denominator across all of the pilots is that a systematic attack that we faced is by participants in a digital election trying to create fake identities. This is a type of attack known in the jargon of the distributed systems and networking as the civil attack. An identity that it's actually multiple identities that are actually controlled by a single identity. Twice, the communists applied this attack on me, first in 2014, when we did a pilot with the City Congress of Buenos Aires, the Workers' Party. They created 6,000 fake accounts and they took control of the digital election. And in 2016, we did a shadow referendum with the Umbrella Movement in Hong Kong, electing a mayor for the city of Hong Kong in like a clandestine election. We had 800,000 participants in this digital referendum. 600,000 of these participants came from the Chinese Communist Party. So kudos to them for hacking our systems. But this is what really helped sharpen our understanding of what is the key problem for unleashing democracy online. In a much larger scale, we could argue that entities that create huge databases of people and they update these databases on a daily basis, like the Chinese Communist Party or its analog for the West, known as Facebook or Facebook Corporation, are basically the instruments that have been used to weaponize against the status quo and how democracies work today. And democracies are simply not able, or traditional systems are simply not able to catch up with technology. So one of the core elements for us is how can we formalize human identity, how we can give citizenship rights in a way that it's not centralized, in a way that it does not depend on a corruptible authority, whether that authority is Mark Zuckerberg or Xi Jinping. So in 2017, we published our first paper about this. In 2020, we published a peer-reviewed paper about this. And in 2021, we launched just 20 days ago, Proof of Humanity. So Proof of Humanity is a decentralized register of human beings that they generate their proof of humanity so they can represent their human rights on the internet and on particularly using the Ethereum blockchain, which is pretty much the only relevant blockchain if you want to build with smart contracts. I'd like to demo you a little bit about how Proof of Humanity works. You can actually access this on your computers at home, proofofhumanity.id. So we have right now, we're about to reach 1,000 humans. We have 991 profiles. All of these profiles are people that have submitted their proof to the registry themselves. We have a very well-known member of the registry, which is Marco Galperin. He's the most important businessman in Latin America, in Argentina for sure. He's the founder of Mercado Libre, which is a company, it's a unicorn company valued at $100 billion. And he's the founder and CEO, and he did his Proof of Humanity just 10 days ago. So the idea of generating this proof is that you have to create a video about yourself, and I'm going to show you Marco's video.
I certify that I am a real human and that I am not already registered in this registry.
So that's pretty much a sworn statement that you are a real human and that you do not have a registry on this registry. You have to say those two things in the video, and you have to display the Ethereum address that you are using to create your registry, which in the case of Marcos, the address needs to match the address that is being used on the blockchain. In his case, it's this address that ends with F7 and 8 and A and 8, which matches the address that we can see on the registry. Once you submit your proof, someone else who has been already being verified by the registry has to vouch for you. In this case, we see Federico has vouched for Marcos. So here I can check Federico's profile, and again here you can see his.
Hello, I certify I am a real human and that I am not already certified.
So everyone has been doing this and vouching for each other. If you receive a vouch, then you have 3.5 days for anyone to challenge your registration. We had a couple of challenge registrations. You can see that these registrations have been challenged for several reasons. Maybe they are not stating, maybe the image in the video is not clear, or maybe the address in the video is not matching the address. For example, this guy wrote an address that is not very clear it's not very clear what he has written on the video. So you can challenge identities that you consider that might be suspicious of, two things, or three things: not having the proper content in the proof, which is very important to do the proof the right way. And the main objective of this registry is to prevent the system from having two things: duplicates, identities that appear twice, and robots, deepfakes. The idea of having to submit a video proof is that, at least today, you can recognize pretty much a deepfake or have a sense that a video belongs to a real person and it's not a CGI or computer-generated image. So we launched this 20 days ago. We have almost 1,000 profiles. And what this means is that we can now create organizations on Ethereum that are democratic, that can democratically vote for issues or for anything we can think of. We have set up a DAO, a DAO means a distributed autonomous organization, which is kind of like a cooperative on the blockchain. The Proof of Humanity DAO is actually it's going to have its first vote on Thursday. It's going to last for a whole week. I actually have to disconnect from this account so you can see this. Let me refresh this. So we have our DAO. One of the important, most interesting elements about this, now that we have a registry of humans.
Sorry, can I just interrupt quickly? You've just got another minute or so. So I'm not quite sure how far you want to go into the details, but maybe if you could just pick out the most important bit.
Sure. So once we have this registry of human beings, means we can start building democratic applications. So this is actually the first DAO on Ethereum. If you're familiar with Ethereum organizations, most of these organizations, the governance is pretty much token voting, which means the largest stakeholders of an organization are the real decision makers. And so the fact that we have Proof of Humanity as the backbone of our system means that we can now start building DAOs that are democratic. And the Proof of Humanity DAO is just an example of a democratic run DAO. And this first proposal will be about improving the token of the DAO. A little bit on the token, we have launched this with a universal basic income token. So once you become a verified human, you start accruing UBI tokens. Here you can see, actually on Marco's profile, you can see that he has accrued 95 UBI. And these are ERC20 Ethereum compatible tokens that trade on the open market. So for instance, you can check the price of the token right now. Oops, where did I put that? Sorry. Let me copy this address here. So you can, the UBI token trades in the open market. And right now, the price of the token is set at, let's see the information loading up here. We have $143,000 of liquidity, which means you can trade up to this amount of money per day. The daily volume being traded right now is around $53,000 per day. The price of the token right now is at 67 cents. Back of the envelope calculation of 67 cents. We issue 1 token per hour. So that will give us UBI of almost $482 a month. So everyone on Proof of Humanity that gets verified, they get this token dripped to their accounts. And even regardless of the fact that you might be maybe in Mozambique, maybe you are in India, maybe you're in Buenos Aires, or maybe you're in Switzerland or Connecticut. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you get the same amount of tokens for everyone. And the tokens trade freely in the open market using smart contracts and the DeFi infrastructure that's already available on Ethereum. So I'm wrapping up. This
Very
is
good.
Proof of Humanity.
Santi, I mean, it's incredibly impressive what Democracy Earth has achieved. And I think if we don't solve digital identities, we will never be able to harness the sort of technological potential that we have for global democratic system. But also the dangers, you're very right in also underlining the dangers that face, it's not just a sweet world out there. But thank you very much. And I will now, last but not least, hand over to Gary Colombo, who is the founding chair of the Global Community, GLOCO. Gary, please, the floor. Gary.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Thank you very much, Lucy, for the kind introduction. Just my background is actually in neurorehabilitation robotics, to be precise. And one of the most important paradigms in neurorehabilitation, but also in learning in general, is repetition. Repetition is the first principle of learning. And so that is why I will maybe repeat a lot of the points that have already been said, because obviously we share similar goals, the 6 organizations, and also because it will hopefully help everyone to learn. Okay, so GLOCO stands for Global Community. And the first question is, why now? Why do we need a global community now? And again, I think we know that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo, I'm sorry, the O is missing here. Victor Hugo should have said that. And now you might ask, why is the time now for this? And I think there's two reasons. One reason, and again, this has been talked about before, so I will not go into the details. There are a lot of global problems, global issues that the planet is facing: climate change, tax evasion, poverty, you name it. And I think that is one of the reasons why we need a global democracy now. But and that's the bad news. We have a lot of global problems. The good news, and that's also why the time is ripe, is that we do have the technology to solve these issues. And I think what we just learned from Santiago Siri is showing us that a lot of things are developing right now that allow us to come up with solutions that are global. And this is a firm belief that we have at GLOCO, that global problems require truly global responses. Now, what are the key aspects of our concept? I would like to point out three most important points for us. And one is, as I said before, that global solutions really need solutions that are worked out with a global perspective. This might sound like a detail, but it's a very, very important point. We heard from Barnaby, for example, today, most of the solutions are created, or people try to create solutions on a national level because they're in national governments, and the only solution they can come up with are national solutions. So only if we go and have the perspective on solving problems from a global angle will we find also solutions that can be implemented. That is one very important aspect. The second very important aspect has to do with the first one, and that's about the buy-in. I mean, we heard also before that there maybe already are solutions existing. A lot of people would know how to solve the planet, but that's not what will make a difference. The difference will only be achieved if we have a buy-in from a majority of the people. And how can we get a buy-in? That's only possible if people have a say. Because whether the solution is created by a citizens' assembly or by the UN or by technocrats or research, that's not the point that matters. What matters is that we do have the buy-in from the majority of people, do have the support, and only then will a global solution also be implemented. We also believe that you always need to approach the appropriate level, and I think we heard that before as well. Local issues can and should not be solved by a centralistic government, right? Local issues should be solved by the local governments or the groups or whatever. The same is true for national issues. That's why GLOCO does not want to compete with any existing government, but we want to be a complement. GLOCO, our global community, will only solve global problems and leave the rest to the existing, some good, some maybe not perfect national and local governments, but we believe that this is how we should approach it. Now, what does the global concept look like? I have a graph here that where I can try to explain to you what we think are 8 main points. And the main point number 1, and we heard Santi with a very interesting and very nice presentation about this, we need global citizens to have a digital identity with all the aspects that we just learned from Santi. And that's also why we think in the Global Democracy Initiative, working together is a very good thing, because digital identity is maybe something that we can profit from the know-how of Democracy Earth. So once every global citizen has his digital identity, his or her, then you see in step number 2, our digital platform, it should be an open, democratic platform, is where you can start collecting issues. So everybody can, nobody has to, but everybody can enter what they think are issues that the world should solve. That's point number 3. Some people might talk about global warming, other people might come up with details. And then it's number 3, there will be an algorithm, and that's a fairly simple algorithm that just figures out, are there many people that see the same issue? Because something to be a global problem means a lot of people have to see the same issue. And the second point is, of course, that also the issues have to be distributed around the world, because if all the issues are entered from North America, then it's maybe a North American issue than a global issue. It could be a side product that different regions also get some issues that they should tackle, but global community will only take care of global issues. Then we get to step number 4, which is the solution collection. Again, it's an open platform, so everybody can enter what they think could be potential solutions. And I think that's important, that here a single person could enter a solution, a citizen assembly could also enter a solution, or a group or nation or researchers. The platform is open. Everybody can discuss every one of those solutions, and everybody can, the more people are working on or liking a certain solution, the higher up it will get on the ranking, so that in the end you will have a consolidation, again, by a transparent and neutral algorithm. There will be the different solutions that come out of this consolidation, and then there will be announced that there are, let's say, 3 different solutions that we can vote on. Then there will be a time given before we have the actual vote, where global discussion will take place. Again, for us, it is important that we are neutral, so GLOCO will not comment or take side. Also, the discussion will take place in the standard media that we already know. Before then, we go into a digital voting, where the people can vote for either one of those proposed solutions. So that is the idea, and we think because the solutions have been generated with a global perspective, we think that's already an important step to find global solutions. Second step, and this is of course a hope, is that there will be clear results, because only if there are clear results, which means a lot of people voting for a certain solution, and also a majority voting for a certain solution, because if you have 49% for a certain solution and 51% against, then obviously this will not be something that will be implemented and very helpful. But the global impact of these solutions is of course a very, very important aspect. And that's also why we have dedicated the second webinar to the global impact, and it will be Lars Lünenburger from GLOCO who in a month will give you more details and explain to you in more detail why we believe that the GLOCO principle will have an impact on finding global solutions. So with this, I would like to go very quickly again to the Global Democracy Initiative. We from GLOCO initiated the GDI because, as I said before, we believe that there's a lot of know-how already existing, that we only need one global democracy, and that if we share forces and work together, we will be much faster in achieving a global democracy. And which system will be the one that we implement doesn't matter, it will be the best one. And we just are very thankful that you all joined this initiative so we can speed up this process and hopefully soon have a global democracy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gary, and a great handover to the overarching mission, which is to accelerate the Global Democracy Initiative. But now we're in very good time. Thank you very much, all presenters, for being so disciplined. I would like to actually open up the floor to questions. I don't think many questions have come in through the chat, so why don't you just raise your hand or make yourself known somehow Gary is raising his hand. Sorry, I can't see everybody. I might need a little bit of help here. Gary's raising his hand.
Yeah, I didn't have the time to write the question into the chat, but I have a question to Santi. I very much like his proof of humanity that he presented. And my question is two questions. I mean, question number one, how did you figure out that there were 600,000 Chinese fake accounts? And if you did figure out, that means you could also have avoided them, is my question number one. And the question number two, how do you prevent duplicates? I mean, I can understand that now it's easy to find a duplicate if there's only 1,000 members, but if there's let's say 1 billion members, how can you still make sure that there's no duplicates? Those are my two questions to Santi.
So obviously it's, you know, an estimate number. When you have a kind of a civil attack, you can trace accounts or addresses depending on the type of system that you are implementing to an IP address. When we analyze the data, you know, during and after the shadow referendum, you see many IP addresses connected to Chinese IPs, which makes us suspicious that when we did this referendum for Hong Kong activists, you know, clearly we were being flooded by Chinese bots, which all of these 600,000 so accounts, which look different on the surface when you trace back the data, they seem to come from a bunch of, or a handful of IP addresses in China. Very similar to what we have seen in the attack we had in Argentina and in other pilots that we have conducted in the past. The truth is that it's very hard even to tell if you have a client server architecture, meaning that you have a lot of clients or a lot of phones or computers connecting to a single server. Whoever controls the server can control the outcome of an election, because that person has the authority to decide who gets to vote, who doesn't get to vote, who gets what rights. The idea of doing this in a decentralized way is a way of preventing that a single malicious actor or authority in the system can corrupt the outcome of the entire election. And trying to understand decentralized identity is not an easy topic. There have been several attempts trying to address this. Making a product that is user-friendly, that it's connected to the right protocols, using the right set of smart contracts takes time, but proof of humanity is a consequence of maturity of the infrastructure available on Ethereum, which allows us today in 2021 to deploy experiments like this. The whole process of how proof of humanity works is designed to prevent civils and robots. The only way we have a guarantee that we can check on the profiles is that at the end of the day, only humans can verify other humans. You cannot necessarily train a machine that the machine, you know, it's exploitable in on itself, and we want to make a registry that can prevent machines from being part of the registry. Today, there's I need to find it, the graph where we have the data of, I do not have this readily available in my computer, so I could show it to you. Unfortunately, I have to search for it. But the process of vouching is really interesting, because we want to prevent, for example, from a spam bot system to take over the registry. And that could happen, for example, if someone generates one fake account and this fake account vouches for another fake account, and then these two fake accounts vouch for other 3, 4, and so on, and suddenly you have a lot of fake accounts taking control of the registry. If vouchers work the same way as likes on Facebook, then that could happen. Facebook does not have this problem, because at the end of the day, they have an authority that checks on the profiles in a manual way and prevents fake identities and stuff like that. In our system, since it's a decentralized system, we do not have a central authority that will have the final word, the vouching is processed sequentially. So if I vouch for someone, until that person is not cleared by the system, the next vouch that I have done will not be processed. So my vouchers are processed sequentially rather than in parallel or at the same time to prevent a spam bot attack. And that gives the users time to detect malicious actors in the system. Every verified profile takes 3.5 days to get verified. If no one challenges a profile during those 3.5 days, the profile is automatically added to the registry. So you have this window of attention of 3.5 days per profile, where you or anyone has an incentive to detect false identities. When you create your own profile, you have to put a deposit in Ether. This deposit is right now at 0.15 Ether. It's a bit hefty. So you will lose your deposit if you put it on a fake profile or a malicious profile, because you can challenge that profile, and that goes to a conflict resolution system called Kleros, which are co-authors of Proof of Humanity. And the Kleros jurors can decide whether the profile was legitimate or not. So you have an incentive, any participating in the system has an incentive to detect false profiles, because if you successfully detect one and the jurors on Kleros agree, then you get the deposit yourself. So you have a reward for detecting false profiles. So we are setting up crypto economic incentives in the hope that this will scale the system. Today is really interesting because the vouching, there's a whole black market going around vouchers. There's people on Telegram offering vouchers for money and stuff like that. That's very common in crypto, to be honest. But we are confident that we have a strong community defending the interests of this network, and we will keep on tweaking and improving these crypto economic incentives to keep the record clean from robots and duplicates.
Thank you very much, Santi. It's really interesting. I think we're going to have to schedule a separate webinar on this, because I think it's something which many of the participants of the Global Democracy Initiative are really keen to understand better. But please, are there any other questions? Any hands raised? I mean, of course, the panelists are more than welcome to ask questions amongst themselves, but also the viewers.
Well, if nobody else asks, I mean, I think Fernando already talked about it quickly, and I would also like to directly ask Barnaby. I mean, you mentioned that you were a fan of digital democracy first, but now you vote more for citizen assemblies. In my view, these two things are not contradictory at all. In my view, those two things are actually very important complementary things, because I do believe the citizens assemblies are, and I think Extinction Rebellion is also promoting that, or is a very nice way of finding solutions that are based on not a majority yet, but on a diverse population. But having a proposal from a citizens assembly, that's only sorry, it's an important step, but it's just giving us a potential solution, but it doesn't give us the vote yet. So don't you think that those two things are much more complementary and both needed rather than one versus the other?
Yeah, so the reason of changing direction slightly is because of as Martin Luther King said, the fierce urgency of now. We need the solutions now. Citizens assemblies can be set up immediately and are already being set up globally. Getting everybody online around the world to give online global democracy legitimacy, I consider that an issue. Perhaps the billionaire chap who's just signed up to Proof of Humanity can give everyone get everyone online. That would be great. I see now the online democracy platforms as an alternative to, say, Facebook, where you're going to get far more facts and a much more nuanced and empathic debating tool. so people get is a much quicker channel to the truth. With the global citizens' assemblies, they could come up with the policy packages. Then you could have national citizens' assemblies, which could agree, disagree, or ask for amendments to be made to the package. Say, for example, if they thought that their nation would suffer a dramatic competitive disadvantage, say, for example, by dramatically reducing their greenhouse gases, they could ask for amelioration. Say, the Tobin tax could, a global tax on international transactions could, that country could be supported with that tax, or that country could just change the way that they create money and create sovereign money so that they could tackle the immediate competitive disadvantage. And then the citizens of that country could go go into a process of referendum. So they could take a list of the global policies that they could have a choice of a list of global policy packages that they could vote on. So everybody around the world could be included, and it's immediate.
I mean, it's really interesting, I think, to think about how kind of real life and virtual democratic processes and procedures can be not just complementary, but really work together to create, quite powerful synergies. I think we're obviously not there yet. I mean, with citizens' assemblies, I think Extinction Rebellion has made some incredible progress, and it has, shown what is possible. But it doesn't seem to me that we're quite at that point where we can percolate it up to the global level. And that will be very interesting. I think that will also be a challenge for the Global Democracy Initiative and all of us, actually, to think about ways, if we think about, if we're collecting issues, we're collecting problems, we're collecting solutions and policies, how we can actually bring that together. So, GLOCO's solution is, of course, direct democracy, every individual. But there are many ways, I think, to tackle that beast, and they're not exclusive.
They are already. There are two systems which are already being enacted. So there's the Global Assembly for people to look up, and there's also the World Citizens Assembly. Global Assembly are looking only at climate breakdown, and the World Assembly are looking at genome editing, which is a global issue, and they're also opening it up to find out the key issues which people of the world find most urgent.
Thank you very much. And okay, you can put them in the chat maybe too. So there's another hand raised. I think it's Jim Ruff. Is that right? Would you like to speak?
Sure. Yes. I'm sorry. I showed up late. I didn't mean to. I don't know how I got the times wrong, but so we have a process called the Wisdom Council process that can be used globally. And I put in some posts in the chat around how it could be done is to establish global democracy and using the Wisdom Council process. And I also put it in the chat a comparison chart of the Citizens Assembly process and the Wisdom Council process. One of the tendency, I think, is to think of democracy as having something to do with policy and something to do with voting. And no, democracy is really a much bigger, better process. It's about the people coming together and visiting in a high quality conversation and reaching some kind of unity about what to do. And then policy may play a role, but basically it's the people talking about what we want to do and coming up with leadership positions to ascribe to government what we want. This is a process of facilitation. It's possible to facilitate this high quality conversation, which, by the way, is not dialogue and it's not deliberation. It's not problem solving. It's not creative problem solving. It's not negotiation. It's not mediation. It's about kind of what happens in a crisis when people come together in response to the crisis and rise to the occasion. And that is a particular kind of conversation that can be facilitated, and we call it choice creating instead of, and there's a way to do that. So anyway, that's too much to talk about, but my bottom line here is that yes, we need democracy, but we need real democracy. We need the kind of and it needs to be global. And it needs to be national, and it needs to be local, and it needs to be, and it really is an infusion of a visiting together where we're all trying to figure out what's best for the whole. And that can be facilitated.
Oh, sorry, I had problems unmuting my microphone. Thank you very much, Jim. I think that's actually a really insightful contribution, because, you know, we will, I think, have some quite tough also debate about how, you know, we've been talking about global democracy, and it's very easy to talk about that kind of, you know, in general, but I think it's kind of, you know, in the nuts and bolts where we do have some quite serious differences as well about what we understand by global democracy. You know, is this the wisdom of the crowds kind of, and do we just need to make sure we have the digital means for people to, for instance, vote? Or is this more a high level policy discussion, you know, where just kind of experts, which may be fielded not from the usual suspects, but from new different communities as well across the globe? And I think those will be really important conversations to have. And, you know, as ever, it probably will not be just one beast which makes the race, but we will need many new imaginative beasts as well. But we still have 5 minutes, so I don't want to hog the floor here. Are there any questions? Any hands raised? Maybe also from the panelists themselves. You're more than welcome to ask each other questions.
What do people think the role of the United Nations should be in all this?
I have an opinion, but no, sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, if your question is what the role should be, then it's clear they should take a very strong role and be more democratic. But I think the problem is how to get there. That's so the problem is maybe not to figure out how they should be. The question is how will they ever get there? And that's where we believe it's maybe faster and easier to create a platform in parallel to the existing governments before we wait for the governments to agree on such a solution. So that is the belief from GLOCO. If the UN would solve the problem, that would be, of course, the easiest and best solution. We just don't believe it's going to happen in the near future. But I don't know whether Fernando maybe has a different opinion or take on that.
Well, when you say the United Nations by themselves, they are not going to solve anything. Let me say also that we should be very careful about the criticism about United Nations, because this is not going the criticism about United Nations not going towards global democracy. It's going towards, you know, war and national ideas, nationalistic populism, etc. So it's about many leaders in Europe or Donald Trump, etc. And so I also say on this that during the 30 years before the creation of the United Nations, we had two world wars. And the United Nations were created. These are not my words. These are the words of the second General Secretary of the United Nations, a Swedish man. I can't remember his name, but he said something very meaningful. He said, the United Nations were not created to put paradise on earth. They were created to avoid hell. And I have to say that if you consider that about 70 years were peaceful years in terms of world wars. The basic goal of the creation of United Nations was accomplished. But the reality is also that the structure was thought for a very different world, and it got, the United Nations got to be something which is completely insufficient in terms of what we need in order to regulate global economy, to make to have global policies against a pandemic or whatever. These all are insufficient agencies, insufficient power, not democratic, and etc. Everybody knows that. So the answer is United Nations by themselves, they are not going to solve that. But I think the initiative of creating a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is a very important way, because one of the tasks of such an assembly should be to restructure United Nations. If we want to restructure United Nations, we need some kind of democratic legitimacy, because the control is on the hands of national governments, you know, the Security Council, the veto power, and so on. What are we doing? What do we have in order to contrast this enormous power? Democratic legitimacy. So that's why a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is starting by, you know, national parliamentarians and working on replicating in some way what happened at the national level with national parliaments. At the beginning, national parliaments were the lords, the British lords, you know. At the end, it's something very different. And the same at the regional level with the European Parliament. So it was Altiero Spinelli, one of my heroes in this war, who asked at the beginning for direct election of representatives to the European Parliament, and then the fight of the federalist movement in favor of the European Parliament having all the powers that the national parliament has at the national level, and so on. I think if we want to change United Nations, we need some kind of democratic institution that is very easy to be created, because in order to create a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, you only need the majority of voting of the votes at the General Assembly, which is not such a difficult. And once you have this here inside the United Nations, we can start a process in order to convert that in what it should be, a world parliament, in order to push global democracy. Tocqueville said that the parliament was the core, the real core of democracy, and I strongly believe on that.
Thank you very much, Fernando. I think, you know, beyond the role of the United Nations, which of course in some way is going to or does play an important role, and thinking about how one can democratize that, I think what you draw our attention to is that, you know, we are in a different era. We're in the 21st century, and we have to look forward, and we have to address the problems of the 21st century with 21st century means, mechanism, procedures. And I think that's something that I certainly draw out of this conversation that we're having and bringing together these different organizations. And I'm delighted to welcome also, you know, new and other organizations and people as well. That we think a little more innovatively about it, that we, you know, that we think imaginatively about it, creatively, and not just think on the level of utopia, which is also possible, but that won't actually solve any global problems, but that we have a happy balance between thinking to the future, thinking, you know, having a big vision, and having that idea whose time has come, but then also really thinking about very specific solutions. And of course, in the end, it will be an architecture and a dynamic, complex mechanism incorporating probably many of the elements that we have discussed today. I'm afraid I'm looking at the time, and as a Swiss, I am also kind of by nature, by DNA, nearly bound to keeping the time as well. So I will now bring this first webinar to an end, thanking certainly all the panelists for their time, sharing their insights and experience with us. I'd like to thank all the participants. And before we close, I would also like to draw your attention to the next one, where we will be going a little bit more into the details and the specifics. So what we will be talking about then is how we actually want to really solve problems hands-on. Each organization has different approaches, as you may have gleaned today. And that should really set us up for the session before the actual launch of the Global Democracy Initiative, where we want to identify ways how we can set the Global Democracy Initiative up in so in a meaningful, impactful way. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you also, Emilia and Nadine, for your technical help. Much appreciated. Wishing you all good health and stay safe, and for those who celebrate, a very happy Easter as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for moderating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emilia. Good job.
Cindy Lee has got this huge big grin on her face. Cindy Lee, are you happy with us?
I'm so chuffed. I'm chuffed.
Hey, wow, God, that's like receiving a medal. And why are you chuffed?
Well, we had no mishaps one. And I think that everyone really did a good job in communicating their organizations. I think
yeah, I mean, first of all, Lucy, you did a great job. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Lucy.
You
Oh,
did
wow,
really
thank you very much. I was
well.
really nervous in the beginning. I don't know why. Just
I guess you also had the toughest job, right? You always had to be concentrated from the beginning to the end. So good job managing also Siri, who was coming late.